Hello. So I wanted to get the stream started because it was supposed to start at 6, but then my parent wanted to update at the same time. So let me remember that I want to share the screen. I'll make a special one just for that. We'll put it to experimental unit. Why not? No, not that one. No, not that either. Maybe it's this one now. Oh, okay. This is the one I'm sharing. Okay, so welcome. My own project is called Experimental Unit. It just is what it is. There's no reason to be attached to this title, just like there's no reason to be attached to Hegelian E-Girl, for example. That's basically a lot of what we'll be talking about today is what I call conceptual churn, which is basically that we need to not be so attached to rigid relationships and definitions of words. This is something a lot of people find threatening and call relativism. I don't know that much about all the political debates everybody's having, but I definitely feel seen, although not appreciated by, for example, James Lindsay. Talking about things like Gnosticism, talking about nominalism. I think it's really interesting the way I think James Lindsay actually makes a lot of philosophy accessible for people, although it's often presented in a negative light. I wonder. Certainly there's. I don't know. I'm sure it's a Dr. Lindsay as well, right? Whatever has come across things. Anyway, that obviously opens up the whole issue of like, the Hegelian E-Girls are associated with the right wing. Also, when I tell people about Dr. Zweibelson, people are often very dismayed. Like people will be like, oh no, like somebody in the Space Force, right, in the Army, the U.S. Imperial Army or whatever, quote unquote, is doing philosophy, right? And so like in Beyond the Pale, which you can see right here, Dr. Zweibelson is going like, I don't know, like I was looking at the part about Mobius strips, like just in terms of like, going over Clausewitz, talking about what he's calling Newtonian style thinking. There's a really interestingly titled article called Breaking the Newtonian Fetish that Dr. Zweibelson wrote. It's really interesting how he chose to use this word fetish here. I mean, I think he describes it as provocative. It's not used that often in the piece. I think maybe I just skipped over it. Like, intentionally provokes readers with. So Zweibelson doesn't really talk about the significance of the word fetish beyond being provocative. I think a lot of people obviously have a major association with the word fetish, just when it comes to like sex and kink and pornography. So, those very exciting topics. It's so exciting. It knocked the rest of the thing out of my mind. But in terms of fetish, especially it's interesting. Obviously, we're talking about Hegelianism. To a certain extent, when we're talking about, are the Hegelian E-Girls fascist or something? Which I mean, I don't talk about, but like if you're considering that as a question, like, a lot of times people want it to be, well, you're fascist, or you have to have like really good Marxist bona fides, or you have bona fides or whatever, or you have to have something else that's like progressive-ish. You might say woke. I mean, woke. No words. All words are made up. That's where like it's funny how the Marvel movies can be advanced, but yeah, woke. Using all these words is so funny because when most people use these words, they have like a big, like strong positive or negative reaction to it. Whereas for me, all words are sort of like this. They're colors on a palette to be used poetically. So a different approach to language where just in general, like, yeah, we shouldn't expect things to be so clear cut because they're just not. Especially with the language that we can be using. Obviously, that makes people very. Another thing to bring up right now is the Hobbesian trap. which you could say is like a corollary to Hegel's dialectic of recognition. I don't know about Hegel that well, so I'm not going to pretend like I know more about Hegel than anybody who knows much about Hegel who might watch this. But in the Hobbesian trap, right, you have a reciprocal problem where there's distrust. So maybe you'd say there's a lack of recognition. There's actually it's not this. It's army military competition. Like, it's interesting here. Like strength and reliability. I think the way that I basically think about the way the army conceives of reputation, which is basically your image, right? So you have to, there's one thing to say is, right, none of this is like forever. This is just like interesting stuff that I want to present to you, and you can pick which parts of it but anyway. So a way to think about the reputation from a military's point of view or from a martial point of view is you have a twofold aspects to your reputation. One is basically the goodness of your will. So like, do you intend to help or harm the given person who would trust you or who is considering what your reputation is, right? If your reputation is preceding you, right, whoever it is that's experiencing your reputation is basically, if somebody's thinking about you, do they think that you want to help them or do they think that you're trying to hurt them, right? And that there's a lot of philosophical subtleties. Getting into another funny thing, obviously we have to talk about Marxism the same way we have to talk about, like fascism. So, Karl Marx talks about the metaphysical subtleties of the commodity or something. I didn't do this on purpose. I'm just like trying to establish that there's this thing called metaphysical subtleties associated with the idea of commodity fetishism. So basically, like, there's subtleties that come down to like, what does it mean to help or harm, right? People disagree about that. That could be a political distinction, right? So that's a big freaking deal, right? Because if somebody thinks that you're trying to hurt them while you're trying to help them, that's a way of positive relationships. And what if you are trying to hurt them, but you're trying to appear as though you want to help them, and then that person buys it, right? And they think you're trying to help them, and then you hurt them, right? That's not a good outcome. So anyway, but you can also think about this in a very Machiavellian way in terms of like, I think this is a very big aspect of the Prince in general. That basically, like, you want to appear good, not be good, or something like this. These are all very important things because this ties back into it's really necessary. I don't know. I saw people saying that associated with the Hegelian E-Girl thing, like there's Machiavellian dynamics and stuff like that, which like I could see. Basically the reason is that this realm of philosophy and theory and social stuff and stuff is getting plugged into the machines, right? So people who are good at ideas or something have the ability to try and get close to the people who have the machines, which is like the people who have like power or whatever. Plus, the realm of ideas is basically an inflection point between, you might say, the way I would break it down is in terms of weaponized concepts and warfighting concepts. So a warfighting concept is it's better to, I guess, speak about it in terms of, in an emergency response operation, you don't really get that same idea of like somebody could be spreading a way of thinking about things in order to confuse you, basically. Yeah, this is the danger. I'll lose my train of thought. But I was speaking before about, the idea of Machiavellianism among the Hegelian E-Girls. So that's another, we might as well go over that, right? Like, if you don't even know what the Hegelian E-Girls are, then there's really only one left standing, as far as I know, which is Nikki, who responded to my going live. So that was cool. And then, like, it got disrupted. It's funny. I guess it's recent. So anyway, so this is Nikki the Hegelian, one of the co-founders, still followed by Anna KW, who's another one of the major ones. There's another person, I think they are on Twitter, but I think maybe they block people who follow this person. I'm not sure. But this is something that we can go over, for example. It's a little early to get into this, but like this is an example of like the drama. And then I have a friend who's not that plugged into the whole philosophy thing, at least anymore, whose main idea is that there's a big problem with unintelligibility. I think that's something people come up with a lot. And I guess it relates to like, there's some quote. I don't even know how to frame it. I always get very annoyed with this. It is right here. This. People use this all over the place, or at least I see this posted on Reddit all the time, which like, it's a fine quote, but it reads like this, right? Never believe that anti-Semites are completely unaware of the absurdity of their replies. They note that their remarks are frivolous, open to challenge. Oh, sorry, you got to see. Oh, no, it's on both sides. Okay, great. But they are amusing themselves, for it is their adversary who is obliged to use words responsibly, since he believes in words. The anti-Semites have the right to play. They even like to play with discourse, for by giving ridiculous reasons, they discredit the seriousness of their interlocutors. They delight in acting in bad faith, since they seek not to persuade by sound argument, but to intimidate and disconcert. If you press them too closely, they will abruptly fall silent, loftily indicating by some phrase that the time for argument is past. Yeah, I mean, in a way, I think this applies to everyone. Like, we all might want to pretend that we use words responsibly, but maybe we really don't. But we're trying to keep up this facade that we are as part of another way of playing, right? This ties into the problem of the law, honestly. So this is all setting the stage for like what I think is not what I think is going on, but like how I'm reading Hegelian E-Girl council or whatever, especially with the council. I have been on about councils already. So that's another just point of inflection. Like basically talking about or being inspired by council communism. But then you can also recall that, I think I'm doing this right. Yeah. You recall that, I don't know, whatever the powers that be or whatever, there's something called the National Security Council, right? Or just the Security Council, right? At the United Nations. So in terms of liberal or realist or whatever, like the established powers or whatever, use this idea of the council. I think that, does China have councils? The state council, sure, right? So I mean, there's councils all over the place. You got city council, right? So, but this flows into did I not come up with this? Council communism, which is something that the idea of a Hegelian E-Girl council, to the extent that you're trying to either be taken seriously by Marxists or whatever, or just be saying that you're doing whatever Marxism trying to do better than Marxism. So you don't care whether you're Marxist or not because like Marxism is conservative at that point or something. Anyway, council communism is related to that sort of mindset. It's been sort of a left communist thing. Basically, as I said, I have, I've been talking about experimental council on my I always do it wrong. I haven't been running this recently, but on the part of my webpage on the radio station, I run an I call it experimental council, right? Because I wouldn't want to call it Hegelian E-Girl council because that's too specific, right? But that's in a way like my problem is that I don't want to commit to doing something like that because I just wouldn't put it that way. I mean, I did in a way, right? Experiment. It's really funny where you see experiment come up in various texts. Since I named something experimental council or experimental unit, that kind of thing occurs to me more often now. But yeah, we do have council communism. And the other thing is, of course, Society of the Spectacle Society of the Spectacle also talks about councils. I guess it's here. Workers' councils. Yeah, I mean, especially at the very end, they're it's basically saying workers' councils are going to do the thing. Okay, so that's where I want to talk about, well, what's a worker, right? There's a reason why I prefer the idea of experimental council over workers' council. It's basically supposed to, again, tie back into this theme of not being too wedded to certain concepts. Because this idea of a worker, no concept can be fully worked out. So even if you wanted to just come up with the orthodox, whatever Marxist definition, people are still going to disagree about that. But then, I feel like there's a lot of things you can open up there. I guess we'll have to get into that eventually. But I want to try and say a little more about the E-Girls and Ben Zweibelson toward the beginning. Because I don't know if I've gone over that kind of stuff in my other live streams, but I'll try to. So just to point out, the workers' councils are also present in Society of the Spectacle, which is an important text to be keeping in mind. I read this when I was 17 in terms of me. And then this is funny. This is how things started. Where did it go? Oh, I hadn't even seen this, but yeah, there's drama around this. I don't know. The point of my intervention is not to pick sides or pretend I understand anything. But I think there is actually a really good something that's in the description already. Maybe that's a good place for us to start. Let's just circle back around to that because there's I keep checking to see if anybody's watching and they're not, but that's fine. I think I can get it here. Oh yeah, it's also at a different place than it's supposed to be. So I could share it instead. Oh, this is not visible. That's good. So yeah, we're going to start with... Is this the one? Which one's the one that I'm sharing? I guess it's this one. No, I don't know where the one is that I'm live. Okay. Yeah, it's on this. Oogie. So yeah, I gotta post. Just kidding. It's here now. Oh, dang it. I'm messing it all up. This is what I want to have here. So this is what I want to read to you. So we'll do that. And we'll also just skip ahead a few seconds. Yeah, because I'm just not. Yeah, I don't feel like editing. And then there's also this. Oh, I can't post there, so I'd have to do it from here. Oh dear. Falling behind. But that's okay. Maybe there will come up a time where I have more time to do that. Okay, back to the action. We're going to talk about this. Somebody was just saying this was what they thought was the signal in the noise. Okay, so let's just read through this. This is preliminary materials for a theory of the young Hegelian E-Girl. Okay, so first thing to know about this, just in case you're not aware, is that, oh yeah, when I say legal nihilism, I mean that, by the way, the law doesn't exist. Not that erosion of the belief in law as a beneficial, I would just stop here. It's not that it's beneficial or pernicious. It's just, just don't believe in the law, basically. It's a form of social nominalism, I guess. But it's not just that. It's also related to, theories of like the state of exception, things of that nature, like a permanent state of exception. But that's getting ahead of ourselves. So there's like a lot of people think this book is like sexist, which I don't know. Maybe it is. I think I've read it. Yeah, it's like, first of all, it's by Tikkun. So yeah, I mean, this opens us up to a lot of things. Like, this is really interesting. Like, Tikkun is really fucking interesting. Like, Tikkun is this thing, it's like French people who are like post-Marxist anarchists. But then it's interesting, like, some people associated with them have whatever gone right wing. Because there's this, right? Who is it by? It's not by Anonymous. Oh, man. I thought it was like associated with one of the people from Tikkun or the Invisible Committee or whatever. Weird. This is like a solid Mandela effect thing. I could have sworn I came up with it a different way. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Tikkun is this like group from France. They take this idea of councils is related to, what's it called? Like autonomous communism or something? Autonomism, right? So like, but see, this is like the reason why left and right are becoming indistinct here is that this is basically saying like, we're going to be struggling for communism or whatever, but we're going to do it on like more and more very bottom up basis, right? So if it's very bottom up, then it's going to reflect the characteristics of the people that are coming up, right? And so like part of the dialectic or whatever, right, is that like we're coming into the situation of transformation where we are. And in a way, we want to have that respected. That gets us to, I don't know much about Hegel, but, the dialectic of recognition, post-Hegelian approach. I mean, we'll just go here. This apparently has a lot of people on it, but should be. Okay, so right. So I mean, Hegel's saying within the phenomenology, this idea of like the dialectic of recognition. I was saying before that this is also a sort of positive reflection of the Hobbesian trap. Because in the Hobbesian trap, it's like you're spiraling downward. Whereas like with at least the idea of recognition is that it could like get more over time. And certainly between individuals. But, I think it's an uneven process, right? It's non-linear in a sense. And so every time there's a war is really the eruption of this sort of Hobbesian trap. It's this like kind of, it's like the buildup of entropy, like the way that we go about with concepts and like embodied structure, like our understanding, the way our apparatus works between ourselves, our concepts, our emotions, other people, their concepts, what we talk about, right? The constellation of all of this, I don't know. It remains very open to everything else that's happening. So like you live in a society, basically. So if there's a war going on, like it makes a big deal to you. So that's, Hobbesian trap again. And I think it's funny because Hobbesian trap can also be called the Schelling's dilemma. And Schelling is a philosopher. I was speaking with somebody about that on Twitter, who I think is associated with the E-Girls. But Schelling is pretty closely related to Hegel, basically. We can learn about these things together. Maybe I should be going over them more. But basically, we're getting off track, wanting to talk about this, but then got into Where did it even go? Oh, it's this. So yeah, the theory of the young girl. So I mean, what this is about is basically, well, I guess there's a lot of writing here, but like, it's basically about maybe a continuation, like of Society of the Spectacle type thinking, to the idea of like this pernicious concept of the young girl being, what am I trying to say here? Like, if in the Society of the Spectacle, right? Right here. The spectacle is capital to such a degree of accumulation that it becomes an image, right? I mean, I'm not so sure about this concept of capital, but whatever, right? The idea is, you are concentrating all of this, like in terms of winning wars and accumulating materials and doing science. You're doing all of this, and it's all of that social power is being concentrated into an image, right? Like, hello, right? Like, ever heard of it? I wish I could. I don't. Oh, this is like Yahoo. It's trying to like sell me an American flag. I'm trying to do like a patent type situation. Oh, it's trying to sell me one too. Anyway. Say la vie. Oh my goodness. They really put a lot of ads on there. Oh, it's not even a real one. How can it be so hard to find an American flag? Oh well. But like, this is an example, right? I mean, the spectacle of a national flag. We've had these obviously for a long time, but I mean, to that degree, the idea of what's spectacular or something is not something that starts in the second half of the 20th century. Like, the idea, one way that I think about this is the overlap between cognitive warfare and religion. Because, or like wars of religion. Like, wars of religion and cognitive warfare is basically saying the same thing. Like, cognitive warfare is this like thing that a concept. It's very similar just to like psychological warfare. But I think actually what's most interesting out of that whole literature is the concept of an influence operation, because an influence operation doesn't have to, like, that bleeds over into what are considered non-military applications, right? So like, what's the effective? I mean, yeah, but then we're getting into the nature of war. But this has everything to do with the Hegelian E-Girls as well as Ben Zweibelson, right? So like Ben Zweibelson, in just like the way the army talks about warfare, right? I've been over this and over this at this point. But right, the idea is that it's a contest of wills, right? So fundamentally, you want somebody to change their mind. And a lot of times, unfortunately, sorry to say, it comes down to killing people because they won't change their mind. Something of this nature. That's what we consider to be war. But I would basically say people are fundamentally trying to change each other's minds all the time. And so in that, there's a lot of conflict. If you want to start getting into, I mean, there's so many conflict theories, right? But the problem with so many of these conflict theories is that they wind up, again, they're from a post-structuralist perspective. Like, the problem is they set up these binary oppositions, right? And like, you can start off wanting to have nuance, but the way these things like get communicated, if you're not, I guess the way that I would put it is, if you're not fundamentally communicating basically all the time about like reminding the listener not to get too wrapped up in the specific words that you're using, like, and so like try and maintain a poetic use of language. Like, I guess if I were a true master or whatever, like, it would be like I would be able to do this as a rap or like as an epic poem, right? Like, that would be awesome. Or, right, what I should be doing, right, is writing papers and stuff like this. But I actually really enjoy this mode more. I don't know if people appreciate it, but like at a fundamental, but that's just like you write a paper and nobody reads it. I mean, that shit happens all the time. Like, tale as old as time, many such cases. Anyway, so you have conflict theories. So what I would say in terms of conflict theory is like, you got conflict a bubbling, right? Not even, but the key thing is that it's not even just conflict. So that's why, like, you'll recall, of course, that Ben Zweibelson talks about himself or discusses themselves. I really try to use they for everybody because I don't respect gender identities, or I don't acknowledge, or what should I say? Like, I don't ratify, I don't recognize, basically. Like, I don't recognize gender identities. I don't know what they're supposed to mean. Like, I don't know what you're trying to communicate to me. Like, I'm trying to be nice, like, I'm not trying to, like, and I won't, especially to anybody personally, like, I won't be a dick about it, especially because, it's known to be a thing, people, like, will be rude about. Like, I'm not trying to be rude, but on a philosophical level, I have an issue. So yeah, philosopher of conflict. But really, Benjamin, like Dr. Zweibelson, like what you're covering is more than about conflict. So maybe another way of explaining myself to doctors about Dr. Zweibelson, as well as, see, look at this, phantasmal emergency. That's not really what I meant to look at. But like a way of relating to, basically trying to relate to the Hegelian E-Girl thing for the moment by just like talking about Hegel's dialectic of recognition, versus then also addressing Dr. Zweibelson, sort of on behalf of all the concerned parties, right? Who are like, but I think Dr. Zweibelson has even written that, the point of doing this philosophy that they are doing is not to just be better and better at doing war and killing people and stuff like that. Like, we can imagine now. I mean, Dr. Zweibelson talks about in a more what's a less sanguine outcome would be that we lose control of war, right? So that's another outcome where it's like, we're so caught up, right? Like everything that we talk about has to do with the way that people are in conflict, and we think that people are in control of these conflicts, and there's something at stake in what we're doing because like we're going to have an effect on the outcome. But if some, I'm doing this again. But if some like computer is super smart and it's better than everybody or whatever, then like we're not even in control. Then it's like that becomes almost nostalgic when like people were killing each other. It's almost like, immigrants are the idea that immigrants are taking our jobs. Like the fundamental job is killing other people, right? Like from a very cynical mindset of like, I guess it's not like, what would you say? It's not even default anybody. It's just the emergent, again, behavior associated with the Hobbesian trap under technological conditions. This is where Heidegger comes in, of course, opening up again, the whole, the kind of thing people get so nervous about, right? Of like, you're talking about Martin Heidegger, or you're talking about Carl Schmitt. I think I mentioned Carl Schmitt before. That's relevant to the idea of like a state of exception or a state of emergency. I would basically say the rule of law fails to, or the like alleged rule of law fails to put an end to a state of emergency. So what there really is a continual state of emergency where sovereignty is juggled. And something that's really tough about that is like a big way that, how would you say it? Like there's a political crisis because there's just so many people in the world and we can kill each other, right? But then there's also a linguistic or cultural crisis where, there's so much which is arbitrary, right? And so it has to continually be justified. And so it's sort of, I don't really want to say irrational, but people will impose and coerce other people into believing things like for like body shaming or whatever, like because these things are supposed to like matter when like they don't actually matter as much as people think they do. Anyway, but we're trying to stay close to, well, I mean, Zweibelson and whatever, but let's get back to this over here. I don't know what can I do? I think I can just keep dragging this over this way. Anyway, so this person, preliminary materials. So I was just going into, LOL, Tikkun a little bit. The other thing that's interesting to say about Tikkun is that their name comes from this thing called Tikkun Olam, which I think is super interesting because it's a part of Judaism, which basically talks about how like there's shards in the world and then they can like come together. And so in a way that is related to, for example, Gnosticism, or I mean, Zoroastrianism, really. It's very similar to like Zoroastrianism. just with this idea that like we're all, there's like shards of divinity or like different pieces. We all have pieces of something and we need to like connect with each other and like share love or whatever in order to be able to bring this together again, what has been separated. So that's what tikkun means, and it makes sense how that would relate to the like leftism or something. I think it also makes sense how it relates to like what I mean by that is like the communist project or something. Like it's this very hippy dippy kumbaya like universal salvation vibes type of thing, you know, where basically, which I'm actually completely on about. Like I think or it's maybe it's general salvation, but like when Miss America people or whatever like talk about you know, they all want world peace. Like that's amazing. The only problem is, of course, that the concept of peace is simplistic. Like peace isn't good enough to get us what you mean by peace. I don't remember if did I already mention this? It was about the metaphysical subtleties, about harming and helping. This has everything to do with what I'm talking about right now, but that is not surprising because everything has everything to do with everything. So earlier I was talking about, you know, like the reputation of the military. And the idea is like, in order, you're recognized not only in terms of do you want to help or do you want to harm, but also your competence or your ability or your capacity. Like, if you want to help, are you actually able to help? Right. So in a war, right, like let's say you have there's one country and you're really good friends, and like your people and their people are just friends, and like you like being two countries, but you know, you're just like super great with them. Only problem is like they basically don't have an army. And then, you know, there's two other parties where like one of them wants to invade you and the other one, like you don't really get along with them, but they have a big army and it's not in their interest for the other person to swallow you up. Right. So then like you might work even closer, right, with the people that you don't get along with, where like, do you want to help? You don't even fully trust these people. But the alternative to going along and, you know, accepting their support or whatever goes along with that, you have to see. But this is continually contested all the way down the line, because in a way it's like, yes, you lose sovereignty in a situation like that, but sovereignty is always unstable anyway, and like the story will get interesting down the line anyway. Basically. So metaphysical help and harm. So your reputation is not just like, do you want to help, but what is your ability to do so? So people who are strong have that aspect of their reputation. But generally, I would say the people who are the strongest right now have very bad reputations in terms of like, are you trying to help or are you trying to harm? Right? Like Donald Trump has a lot of symbolic power right now. Like they're a celebrity that has a lot of you know, clout or whatever. Like if they decide to do stuff, then that makes a big difference in the world. I forget where I was going with that. Powerful people, but a lot of people don't trust them, right? A lot of people don't like Donald Trump, right? But that's true of everybody. Like if you look at the Congress, or if you look at, I mean, the military has pretty high approval ratings from what I understand. But still, people also have a bunch of conspiracy theories, or shouldn't say it that way, but suspicions, right? People are cynical about like the deep state and the intelligence agencies and the alphabet soup bureaucracy and everything like that. And it's just that a lot of the people who are talking about that, again, this is again back to this whole thing of like, uh-oh, you're being a fascist. Like the people who are on about the deep state, right? Donald Trump, right, has talked a lot about the deep state. So, uh-oh, if I'm talking about the deep state, then maybe I'm talking about Donald Trump. Like, and it's just like people get so suspicious. And the other thing is a lot of people aren't, what would I say? They're not seemingly that sophisticated. So it could very well be like that they are, you know, they're secretly in Trump world or something. I guess the other thing to say about that is that, you know, this is really about social networks. So in terms of like, what does it even mean, right, for somebody to be a fascist, or like, is Ben Zweibelson like a good person or not? Like that would have to do with, you know, well, what is Dr. Zweibelson doing inside the military, right? There's a lot more to their activity than just writing books. Like they're influencing and talking to you know, other people that are inside there, or like with Anna KW and Oh, funny. Dr. Zweibelson follows Anna KW. This is so amazing. I think that, yeah, Anna KW, that's so great. I think I got them to follow each other. Anywho, that goes to show you, and that goes to show you why I'm doing this live stream. Actually, they're like, this is something to harp on. Like, Ben Zweibelson is followed by Anna KW on X, and Anna KW is followed by Ben Zweibelson. I mean, it makes sense because they're both like theory. I mean, I'm also this theory brained person or whatever, but like I'm jumping around, like you might say it's like superficial or whatever, but it's more so just like very pastiche, and I'm looking for people to be in conversation with. It's just very difficult. Anywho, but like these people, are very have things. I don't know. I don't know if I'd say that they're more worked out or something, but they're also like more tame. I'm pretty much a wild child, so they're not, I don't think. Well, Anna KW follows me, but Anna KW follows a lot of people. Anyway, doesn't matter. Point was just like in the reason why it makes sense to tie together Ben Zweibelson and Anna KW is that they are interested in each other, right? There's a real social connection, right? But so what does that mean? I don't know. Like, are they sending direct messages? Like, maybe. Like, that kind of thing is just so interesting. And that gets down to basically what I would have to say is about, I mean, it relates also to council communism, probably to Schelling. I don't know exactly how. There's something called this. It would be related to that. It's something like this. Oh, well. It's something like this. Oh. Is that? It takes a network. McChrystal. See? I know what I'm talking about. The new frontline of social. Right. So, like, it's about social networks, which makes sense why, like, in terms of this space where the Hegelian E-Girls are going into, it's like there is what to say, there's a lot of intellectualism going on in terms of like bandying about ideas, like on the right and on the left, and or whatever. Like, I don't even really agree with this whole two sides thing. But like the reason why it makes sense to be suspicious is that everything that we're doing is really like networking. We're interfacing with the social networks that are around us in the world, right? And so a lot of it has to do with not just like, okay, so what are your ideas, but who do you know? And depending on who you know, like how are you trying to influence them, right? So that reminds me of some of the drama with Hegelian E-Girls. Anna had said something about, or like tweeted something about, like basically being really sure of themselves, and that's why it's okay for them to be around like a lot of people they disagree with. It had to do with this idea of moving through racism non-racistly or something. I don't really know what that was about. I think it's interesting, but what was I trying to say? But then, like, I mean, that breaks down, right? And that's really relatable in the sense of like, in a moment, you feel like you really understand things, like you're making moves, shit's going well, but then like things can become overwhelming. Like the ground can move, and basically people are not necessarily who you think they are, and this just plays out over and over again. But it also has to do with what is the mindset that we're coming into things with. So that has everything to do with this. Let's get back to this, right? So preliminary materials for a theory of the young Hegelian E-Girl. We've talked a little bit about this is funny because it's like the young girl, but it's also the young Hegelians. The young Hegelians is a whole other thing that I forgot to mention, or didn't put together until now. The young Hegelians was like younger people who came along who liked Hegel, and Marx was one of them or something. So So that's cool. But the young girl, but this whole idea of the young girl is also definitely, I think, related. I mean, there's a whole question of like, to what extent, like, what is there to say about this idea of an e-girl, right? And am I qualified to talk about this? And it's like, I don't know. But in this theory of the young girl, it's this idea, right, that the image of a young woman, or the idea of a sexy young woman or something, people, or a person who's considered a young woman and who is considered sexy by many or whatever, right, is like, I mean, you can see it used in advertising. I think Baudrillard has a line where he's talking about how, like, this is basically a form of mockery and humiliation of the female form or something. I think basically like cheapening it to, like, basically showing it and displaying it in this alluring way. What I mean is, like, in advertisements and stuff, not to like blame women for dress, or people, for anybody for dressing a certain way or something, but just like the mentality around it is like that it's on display in a way because it can be, like, because it's like there's that. And then, yeah, what I would say though with it, I really associate with, it's a funny thing, but I associate with like femininity, I guess, a sense of openness. So like one of the archetypes, it's symptomatic that I have to look it up this way, because I'm really interested in this person's consort, or I guess they had a fucked up relationship because they got married like when they were really far apart, although allegedly they never had sex. So, I mean, they probably had sex, what I would say the real way, aka sex two, but they allegedly never, what they say is that it was never consummated, right, in the old language. So, oh, right. Her name's Debbie something. Oh, yeah, it's funny because, again, this reminds me. Yeah, this is where we start to get into this, all this stuff. Because that starts to remind me of Savitri Devi, right? Savitri Devi is like this person who like combined Nazism with Hinduism. It was already combined, but she like worked that out more. And then this is related to, the whole idea of what they say, esoteric Nazism and stuff like that. So again, obviously we're back in the territory of like, there's something right wing about what's going on. But anyway, in terms of just jumping back here, we're talking about like the e-girl. So like, what is going on with girls, right? So like, women are, you call it like the idea of the thirst trap. People will be suckered in. Maybe there's an element to like the feminine persuasion or something that seems in a way disarming. I guess just associated with the reputed, stereotypical and often true, disparity in like size or whatever. Maybe a woman's not going to beat you up, although plenty of people get beat up by those that are considered women. I don't actually believe in men or women, so I'm still working through my own conceptual churn. So thank you for your patience during my transition. But anyway, when I think about just this idea of so, I mean, that's something that I come into it with, because I don't really want to think about the divine masculine and the divine feminine personally. But see, where that gets then tricky is like, I understand that to a lot of people, that kind of stuff is really important. Not just in terms of like, some people are into traditional gender roles, but also people who are like super hardcore reacting against that, right? People who, or even like the concept of transitioning from one gender to another, in a way, keeps these static categories of gender in a way that I don't conceptually agree with. But again, not here to be, a jerk to anybody. Just interested in playing this stuff out. But so for me, what's interesting is to consider. Oh yeah, I'm thinking. Sometimes I think that I should talk in a deeper voice. Maybe that would be better. So I can try that. But I'm always going to come back up, right back up here. Anyway. So in terms of the feminine, the divine feminine, where I think there is. What did I say? Not that there is something to it, because in a strong way, like I would disagree with those like religions or theologies that think that gender or sexual difference is like hard coded into like the basis of reality, which is funny. This is something that I like disagree with Anna KW on. Although I've never really, it's a funny thing. You often never really get a chance to correspond with people to like the degree necessary to really even hash out what the disagreement is, if any. Oh dear. That's not really what I meant to do. So we're trying to stay here. I forget what I was just saying about Anna KW. But but basically what I was trying to say about femininity, at least, was Sarada Devi basically had, in terms of the Holy Mother, the way that it worked out between this person and Ramakrishna was that this person would often be very like sharp, like the way this sort of gets into like upaya, which is a really important concept. It basically means, you use the right tool at the right time. So if you think about sometimes the Eastern meditation person or whatever, I guess I shouldn't say Eastern, but, like a Hindu or like, all these terms are problematic, right? Every term is problematic, right? It's not symptomatic, like in a way it's symptomatic that I don't replace all the terms, but like, yeah, it's important to read that as a generalized symptom of concepts, not just that, the idea of Hindu is problematic because there's so many things to it, or Buddhism. Buddha didn't want to be called, reified like that. Anyway, the way that this worked out is that Ramakrishna would be more like, it was like means tested, right? Like if you were going to be a disciple of Ramakrishna, like that took a lot. Like there were a lot of demands, and maybe you would be treated severely, right? Whereas this person was sort of like being nice to everybody. And so she would care for everybody. And so that, I think, is a really important thing. And it's a funny thing because I forget where I read about this, but this ties immediately into the idea of pornography, right? Because the idea is no matter what it is you want to look at, right? There's a kind of pornography, or, I mean, it's really not true, but like for a lot of things, right? There's a lot of different types of pornography, as we'll agree. And so, like, depending on what it is you're looking for, if you find the pornography is basically telling you, like, you're okay. Like, you should be gratified exactly the way that you are, because whatever you think is this alluring thing that you want to pleasure yourself to, other people think the same thing. And so here it is. It's been created for you. Like, or like someone's created it for themselves and they're sharing it. So it's like, you're basically, but I mean, a lot of people don't like this, right? This is not to say that pornography is a good thing necessarily, but because it's similar to, like what the snake said to Adam and Eve in Eden. Something about being as gods, but it's also something like it's also something like the snake says that accept all cookies. Yeah. Basically saying like, what is the lie that or the thing that I'm thinking about with the serpent? Oh, it's like saying that you haven't sinned, right? There's nothing wrong with you. So you're basically just like God. Like there's nothing wrong with you, right? So this idea of that you're okay the way you are can be a dangerous idea, is what I'm trying to say. But I think there is something to the idea of something being welcoming, right? Like if somebody is a complete butt, right? Especially, let's say they're in a coma, right? Like somebody could be the most evil, like having killed a bunch of freaking people, right? I mean, people can come out of comas, right? I don't know. But just like depending on what it is, like I can see the idea that you help people, right? And you want to be inviting and you want to be hospitable to them. And I think there's also again in relation to like, but what about hard-nosed things and the Hobbesian trap? I think I'm going to invoke To Ramona Protocol. This is a Bob Dylan song as we just like walk through the valley of the shadow of death here. I kind of want to just like open all the tabs. But it's basically a question of reciprocity. Because the last line of this song is where Bob Dylan is saying, like, someday maybe, who knows, baby, I'll be the one who's I'll come and be crying to you, right? And also, again, I mean, seminal philosopher, right? Everything passes, freaking Heraclitean. Anyway, we need to be moving on. But I was just trying to say, like, in terms of this girl, like, what is enticing about the idea of a young woman, right? I think it's basically like the idea that this person is inviting. And I think it has a lot to do with, I don't know if we'd say sexist, but a lot of socialization, a lot of sort of people pleasing and and a lot of things, but also like this idea of being a person who's considered a woman, who's considered attractive, enables a kind of social power, which is also used. Not even just for the agency of those people themselves, right? Again, like there's not just like sexy women or whatever on billboards, but like you could operationalize that as a politician, but then like the people who are maybe trying to play you. Anyway, so this idea of femininity, for example, like this is going on right now with Kamala Harris, right? Kamala Harris, in a way, is an e-girl, right? Because most people experience Kamala Harris, or I guess I'm supposed to say Kamala. I'll like call you Kamala. Okay, so like Kamala Harris, like people are like, she's so young and good looking, right? Or whatever, even though she's like pretty old, but like, but the point is like this idea of being a pretty woman, like Sarah Palin or I don't know, I forget who's the person who looks just like Ben Shapiro. It's like really scary. But there's so many things like this, like the late Anna, I guess, from the Young Turks or whatever. I don't know if you've noticed, like Anna. I mean, this is not even really fair. I'm not criticizing or something, just to be clear, but it's like Anna Kasparian or something, like dyed her hair. Like it's like she sort of not went on, but like plays into this idea of, the blonde person who's giving the news, right? So like more dyed blonde hair, right? As opposed to, I mean, maybe they are a blonde and they dyed their hair for this, as far as I know, but I don't think so. But anyway, it doesn't matter. I mean, for that matter, people also talk about with Claire Elise Boucher, right? To get into, Grimes or whatever. Like people say that Grimes dyed their hair, that Claire dyed their hair because Elon Musk prefers blondes, right? And there's this whole idea that's like, there's a whole fucking movie about it, right? Right? And then to like think about like how, like, I think we get, it's like we set a hard line, right? Around like the age of 18 these days, but just it's important to reflect on like, there's a lot going on, and especially in the past. Like the chorus of this song is, "You're 16, you're beautiful, and you're mine," right? And this is not by somebody like, this is by like an older person. I mean, this person, let's see, this came out in 1960. This person was 1925. So this person was 35, right? Talking about a 16-year-old, right? So in this day and age, that'd be very scandalous. But, or like in a freaking, what's it called? I Saw Her Standing There, right? By the Beatles. Like it starts off and it's like, she was just 17, you know what I mean. And it's another thing with pornography where people talk about how like people look for teen pornography. And a lot of people think that's very disgusting. But if you're going to look at it positively instead of normatively, like there's something happening. And even for a long time, right? I mean, well, I was seeing this. There was some people saying that it's healthier for people to become pregnant if they're going to become pregnant, like more in their 20s. So it's not necessarily that, in the past, people would become pregnant like super young. It's interesting that in our day and age, maybe that happens more than it happened thousands of years ago. Just because of like, we have basically brain worms, right? Like in terms of like what you mean by decadent, like I don't think about it like that. I almost think about it like cancer, right? It's like in terms of our concepts, and it's not just concepts. It's our embodied experience. And I guess this is what Anna might call like mediation, right? The way that our experience of the world is mediated and the concepts that we think of with that, like, is problematic. Like one way to think about it is, I don't want to lose my, but basically double bind theory. This is interesting. So yeah, double bind theory. So basically, like you have to think about this in the context of a generalized situation where people are trying to influence each other. And in order to influence each other, people are basically gaslighting each other. People are using deception. And even after, even after deception, there's meta deception, because it's like we could agree about what happened, but now we're going to disagree about why it happened. And I might lie to you about why I believe it happened. And that's now a new lie. It's not that I'm lying about necessarily about exactly what happened, but now I'm lying about what I think about it, because it's more convenient for me in my power struggle with you to adopt a certain position rather than saying what I think is really true. So that basically then creates, double bind. I think it's sort of like the imposition of cognitive dissonance, right? But it's not just cognitive, right? This is a very deeply, you can tell how bad my spelling is on whatever. But I mean, this is not just like a cognitive phenomenon, right? This is basically like equivalent to like having your soul ripped in half or whatever, because it's like you have to be divided, and then it's like you're divided against yourself. And so now it's like you're in this overwhelming situation where with other people, right, where there's basically conflict going on. So you're in a state of war, but you're at war with yourself. Like, that's a horrible position to be in, which is also why your enemy in a war or whatever will try to impose that on you. That's called like I think maybe it's a negative influence operation. I forget what it is, but it's basically this thing where it's like, if you're doing a cognitive influence thing, you could either be trying to build something up or tear something down. So like you're trying to decrease people in China's perception of the legitimacy of the government. Whereas for America, maybe you're trying to increase, you're trying to, increase faith in some things and decrease faith in other things, right? So that's an offensive and defensive. Forget why I went off on that. But there's just a lot going, even in the title of this thing that I'm trying to read to you, there's just a lot going on. But I think I just need to finally, I just need to finally put a stop to this and try and get to it. Okay. So I went with some friends to the Hegelian. Okay, who wrote this? This is the last thing. The Charnel House. This is probably somebody known, or maybe this is anonymous. Is it by Ross Wolf? I don't know. I've seen that name around. I'm going to have to learn about that person. Anyway, so there's preliminary materials for a theory of the young Hegelian E-Girl. So I went with some friends to the Hegelian E-Girls VIP symposium last Saturday, August 3rd. That was a funny thing in general. Like, I RSVP'd for their event when it was like anybody could go. I was accepted. Then something happened, weirded me out. Nikki posted something to like the event invitation, like they had some special app that was doing it. And there was some comment Nikki sent that was like, all the women need to shave their armpits. And I was like, that's fucked up. So like going forward, like that is a thing I need to remember, because like it's all fun and games or whatever. It's fun to like be able to talk with people and just like talk about philosophy and stuff with people who are, I don't know if they're really a big deal, but like people who are, becoming known. It's like pretty cool. But this whole idea of like people having to shave their armpit. I mean, that's the kind of thing where it's like that. I don't know if I would say it's not that it's right wing or something. I feel like it is sort of right wing coded, but like I don't. In terms of you want to know how I think about the right wing and the left wing. Like, this is where I like Jean Baudrillard. And I mean, a lot of people would probably find this problematic, because he says stuff like politics is on the far right and Le Pen is like the only savage analyst, right? But I don't think that means Baudrillard is not saying he likes Le Pen. The point is just like there's a new form of politics that's emerging where it's like you have to be willing to basically be an eldritch abomination. Well, there's also another example. He for example, well, I mean, this wouldn't mollify a lot of people, but Baudrillard speaks not only of Le Pen this way, but also Ayatollah Khomeini. That it's basically you're willing to take on this energy of evil, and that is very powerful. But this comes from an interesting philosophy of good and evil. I mean, there's so much to get into. I'm trying to get back to over there. But in terms of how I think about right and left, Baudrillard is basically saying here, analysts can no longer be found on the left or the far left, right? And then he says only the immigrants, perhaps, right? So to give you an example of Baudrillard's ambivalence, Baudrillard's saying like immigrants, right? People who are definitive outcasts or something, people who are like on the outside and sort of able to like analyze society. I don't even know exactly how to say it. I personally believe anybody can do this. But, as he always says, they're also being recycled, so basically like you want to disrupt the concepts that other people are using, but if you can be assimilated into their concepts, then, that's something else. It's not that means they win forever. It's just that like, that's like we're on a train that's like headed toward a cliff. And so being able to disrupt the concepts that society is doing is like allowing you to change where the train is going. So if we lose, like, it's okay. Yay, the people who are running the train win, or like the people established concepts win in the sense of like, what he's saying, being recycled for good and responsible humanitarian thought, right? Like we can just think about this in terms of like how we can launder this back into how we're good people and we don't have to think about this and go back to brunch, right? Basically, like this is like, we don't all have to do politics. We don't have to do total civil defense. Right? Like people are delusional, right? Because they think that, they don't need to be concerned about civil defense, right? People are delusional because they think that, to quote the times they are a changin', like, people are deluded into thinking that the battle outside raging will not soon break their windows and rattle their walls. When in fact, again, if you check the tape, that is exactly what we'll be doing. So anyway, that was just me being a little bit strident, but the point is that, like, what does this mean? Basically, the stakes of this that I'm trying to clarify right now are that, like, first of all, like, it's not a problem. There's no point judging people. Like the immigrants didn't do anything wrong, right? By being recycled into good and humanitarian thought. The immigrants didn't do anything wrong, right? By being recycled into good and humanitarian thought, right? Like that's one thing I'm concerned about. Because in a way, like everybody's been recycled into this, right? And so the idea is to try and bust out, but not in a horrible way. Like Le Pen or Ayatollah Khomeini or whatever are busting out of basically, this good rules. Like if Baudrillard heard about this rules-based order or whatever, like, that would make him want to puke, right? Like this, it's dripping with insincerity, basically, is a problem. So Le Pen is the only one who operates a radical erasure of the so-called distinction between left and right, right? I don't know why he's saying this about Le Pen in particular. Maybe, that's where people would like jump down my throat or something. But yeah, I guess we're going to have to get into this later on. But radical erasure of the so-called distinction between left and right, this is no doubt entered by default. Okay, so I mean, he's at least saying like, yeah, it's not like Dude Bro is like the greatest ever. It's just like the way Le Pen is going about things is just, it's the sort of established guardrails don't work or something, or there's a certain aspect of social control or perception management or something, which like Le Pen is sort of just like slicing through, as opposed to like being constrained by. And that's similar like to Donald Trump in certain ways, right? Donald Trump has now lost their mojo or whatever, but at least in terms of like what we can aspire to do is like, we can be very decisive. We can take very, like in terms of this Hegelian E-Girls thing, this is basically a new version of the propaganda of the deed. Like, but the question is, what does it mean? Like, I'm not saying, like, nothing's good or bad. Like, like Hegelian E-Girls versus a TV show. Like, a TV show could have, like, some good and bad messages in it. Like, anyway, the question, though, is, like, I find it interesting because it's, like, enmeshing, like, politics, philosophy, theory, but also eroticism. Like, this ambivalent, reference to the E-Girl, I think, is what makes it interesting. Like, that is why it became exciting or something, because it taps into this anxiety, right? Because this idea of the E-Girl is sort of like it's like the E-Girl is replacing a pet, or it's replacing a girlfriend. Like like the idea of engaging with virtual people on the internet, or not virtual people, but like engaging with people virtually on the internet instead of engaging with them in real life. And like we can be so judgmental about that, right? In terms of like, it's not as good, or people can agree that it's not as good, but other times people can have very intense exchanges, even across, cyberspace or whatever. Sometimes those, and even in terms of what is allowed in terms of just our social network, keeping in touch, all right? Like the CIA uses devices to communicate with each other. Like it allows us to keep in touch. Anyway, so this idea that we are like ghosts to each other, this e-girl, reminds me of like the electromagnetic spectrum. It's like a girl who's on the I'm imagining like a true e-girl would be, it's like a person made of electricity who like jams like the enemy signals or something on the EM plane. Anyway, I'm going to need to take a break here in a second. I'm going to try and figure out. I think I can do that. I'll also have to end this. It's just not good, but... So, yeah, we haven't made it very far into this. So I want to take a break soon. So, yeah, maybe I'll just give up on doing that. And then the next one that I do, I'll start off just by reading this and trying not to be so distracted. So with that being said, that will conclude the stream for now. Thank you to anybody who ever watches.